everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex, and it is Tag Tuesday, and I have been tagged by my friend Kat at Kat's Novel Adventures to do the Bookish A to Z Hot or Not tag. The tag was originally created by Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads, so I'm going to make sure that he is included down in the description below since he deserves credit for coming up with this idea. This tag is a series of genres and bookish concepts listed from A to Z, and I have to tell you whether I think that it is hot or not. Not in the sense of whether the bookish community thinks it's hot, but whether it is something that I would choose to read or participate in. I have not thought about my answers for this in advance, and I have no idea how many of these are going to be hot or not, so I'm going to try to give a count of them at the very end. And without further ado, here we go. Letter A is going to be audiobooks. Now, I personally don't enjoy listening to audiobooks. I don't really like having to find a voice or a narrator that I enjoy, but I also think that audiobooks encourage too much multitasking, and I don't pay as much attention when I'm listening to an audiobook as I would if I were just reading a physical copy. So I prefer to read physically or digitally only and not listen to any books. Letter B is Bildungsroman, which means dealing with a person's formative years or spiritual education. I would say that I do enjoy books that are about coming of age, because that's kind of the way that I am interpreting this word. Coming of age stories can be really nice, particularly when they are emotionally impactful, and I love a good hard-hitting story, so if it falls within that vein, that's going to be a hot for me. Letter C is going to be children's books. Now, I don't read a lot of middle grade, and I don't really read any picture books, but I'm actually trying to get back into reading middle grade novels because I think that children's stories have a lot to offer, and they usually have great morals. They have great stories about friendship. They handle a lot of hard topics that I think sometimes even young adult books don't really cover, and so I'm going to say that this is a hot. Letter D is going to be digital. Now, I do enjoy reading digital copies of books. I have nothing against them. I have several Kindles, and sometimes I will even read books on my phone, but I primarily read physical copies of books. There's something that I enjoy about the tangibility of seeing how far I am through a book rather than just looking at a percentage, but this is still going to be a hot for me. Letter E is going to be experimental. Now, I think experimental means different things for different people because you could be saying the way in which a book is written, so that could be something like mixed media, which I do enjoy in books, or it could be a particular topic. Though admittedly, I can't think of any right now. I'm not even sure whether books that I've really read have been experimental. The only one I can think of that I read was The House of Leaves, and I did not enjoy that book, but that's not the only mixed media book that I've ever read. It was also just a very strange story that I didn't particularly care for, so I guess in that vein it would be a not, but I'm open to reading stories that are written differently or maybe cover topics that aren't usually talked about, so this one's a little difficult. I'm gonna say because I don't focus on this, it would be a not, but I would be open to it, if that makes sense. F is going to be fantasy, and this is a hot for me. I really enjoy fantasy. Now, I do not enjoy fantasy romance. I don't enjoy YA fantasy, but I enjoy fantasy in the traditional sense of we are being transported to another world that is usually a reflection of our own, and we go on some sort of grand adventure. I also enjoy magical realism, where there is magic that is taking place in our world, or it has been warped in some way. Our world has been warped in some way by magic use. I would think of Harry Potter as kind of being magical realism because the Muggle world still exists, but then you have the magical world as well, but they both overlap. So yeah, that would definitely be a hot. Letter G is going to be graphic novels, and this is also a hot for me. I enjoy an excellent graphic novel. I admittedly don't own very many, but the ones that I tend to pick up I really enjoy, and I actually have some on my list right now that I'm looking forward to reading. I'm also a huge fan of comic books. I have collected Hellboy comics since I was quite young, and I have a massive collection. I also have quite a collection of Spider-Man comics as well. So really, graphic novels, comics, I feel like they kind of fall in the same vein, so that's definitely a hot. Letter H is horror, and that's going to be another hot for me because horror is actually my second favorite genre after science fiction. I love reading horror. I'm always looking for something that kind of scares me. I've been branching out a lot more recently because I primarily was reading Stephen King for my horror. Stephen King was my introduction into the genre, but now I'm kind of looking for other things to read as well, and that's actually why I created my horror trope video where I talk about my favorite tropes in horror and was looking for recommendations from you all. So yeah, definitely a hot. Letter I is going to be inspirational. This is going to be a hot for me as well, mostly because I feel like inspirational stories typically are hard hitting. I enjoy stories where our main characters are going through something difficult, where they have some sort of obstacle to overcome. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be fighting some great evil. It could be an obstacle within themselves, but as long as it has kind of this uplifting ending or an inspirational message at the end, I typically will enjoy that. Letter J is going to be journalism. This is probably going to be a not for me, only because I am just now kind of branching into the world of nonfiction. I haven't picked up any books that I would consider to be journalism, though I have had some recommended to me recently, so this not could very easily turn into a hot if it's something that I discover that I really enjoy, so I'm open to it. Letter K is going to be kitsch, which has a popular or sentimental appeal. Sentimental books I really enjoy, but I don't know necessarily what it means by popular appeal. I don't maybe read that many books that are popular, but I try to read books that have won awards. So if it's like a National Book Award winner, a Pulitzer Prize winner, if it was part of a book club, if it was a book of the year, those are going to be books that I am interested in picking up because so many people have enjoyed them. So I guess from that perspective, yes, kitsch would be a hot. Letter L is going to be library. Now, the fun part for me with library is I have always loved going to the library, but I was primarily buying my books, and then whatever I didn't end up enjoying, I would either sell to a half price books or I would take it to donate it to the library. But I wasn't actually getting my books to read from the library. That changed this year when I went into a no-buy year for books, and I have been utilizing the library much more as a resource, and honestly, it's been fantastic. I feel like I have fallen in love with going to the library all over again, so this is a huge hot for me. Letter M is going to be mystery. Now, mystery is a genre that I don't read a ton of, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy it. I do like a good mystery every now and then. I have read some Agatha Christie, so like The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Murder on the Orient Express. I've also read some more modern mysteries that I guess you consider to be kind of cozy. If it's a mystery that incorporates some sort of horror element or maybe some sort of thriller element as well, I'm also probably going to enjoy that. So even though I don't read a lot of them, I like them, so I guess that would fall into a hot category. Letter N is going to be nonfiction. Now, as I said, I'm kind of just now branching out into nonfiction. I've only read 2 nonfiction books this year. I'm looking to probably pick more up into next year. So far, my only branch into it has been memoirs. I haven't read any sort of like history books or talks of like politics or modern day affairs. I probably will end up liking more the more that I delve in and find what exactly it is that I enjoy from nonfiction. But that said, I'm not reading a ton of it right now, so I would say that that's probably a not. Letter O is going to be omnibus. Now, I do enjoy omnibus collections for comics because I like that you kind of get this massive collection all in one, and I actually have those for the Mass Effect editions, which are some of my favorite comics because I love the Mass Effect games. They ended up creating comics and some novels, which I own all of. So if you're looking at it from a comic perspective, love them. If you're looking at them from a story perspective, I am not a big collector of short stories, like short story collections. Funny enough, I'm one of those people that if a short story has been turned into its own novella, I'm actually more likely to buy that than a collection of short stories. And I haven't bought any omnibuses in a really long time, so I'm actually going to go with not for this one. Letter P is going to be poetry. Now, I don't like poetry at all. Like in any way, shape, or form, I have never enjoyed poetry. Back when I was still in school, we were required to read poems and try to come up with the meaning of like, what does this poem represent? And I never got what the true meaning of the poem was. Like I always take things quite literally, so when a poem is about something where you're supposed to read between the lines and get the subtle nuances, I'm just not that person. I can analyze a story and themes and symbolism all day long in a novel, but for whatever reason, I can't do that in a poem, and it might just be because it's so short form. But yeah, that's just something that I have never enjoyed, so that's going to be a not. Letter Q is going to be quests, and because I enjoy fantasy, because I love science fiction, this idea of the space opera or our heroes going on a journey, absolutely, I love quests. Quests will fall into the hot category. Letter R is going to be romance. Now, this one I have a very complicated feeling about because I don't mind when a book has a romance in it. I want to make that very clear, but I do not enjoy reading romance novels where the romance is the main plot of the book. I also don't enjoy any sort of like smutty romance because I don't know, a romance not being the main plot in a book, usually it tends to be very tender. They're building it over the course of the story. It's not something that just happens, like it's not insta-love between characters. I don't enjoy that at all. So I'm going to say not for this one. Letter S, of course, is going to be science fiction, which is my #1 favorite genre. So this is going to be a huge hot for me. I love pretty much anything dealing with aliens, talking about physics, talking about, you know, disease or plague or funguses spreading around the world. I did another video about my top 10 science fiction tropes, and I asked for recommendations in that video as well, and that one was a ton of fun for me to make just because I love science fiction so much. So if you'd be interested, you could go check that out as well. But yeah, huge hot. Letter T is going to be translation. So this is going to be a book that is translated from one language to another. I have not had much luck with translated editions. Not that I didn't enjoy them, because actually I have rated some translated works quite high. So one example would be Haruki Murakami's Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, which I gave 5 stars. I thought it was great. But I find translations are very difficult for my brain to process because you can tell that they're not natively English. And so it takes me a while to work through those books because they just sound funny, and typically the reason they sound funny is because they're so formal. Another translated work that I read was The Master and Margarita, which was translated from Russian to English, and it was the exact same issue. Like the language just wasn't meshing with my brain, but from what I got of the story, I did enjoy it. If I had to choose between reading a translated work and a non-translated work, I would probably pick one that wasn't translated just because it would be a bit easier. But that doesn't mean that I won't read something that was translated from another language. So, oh, that one's a little hard. Because I wouldn't seek it out, I guess this would have to be a not. Letter U is going to be Übermensch. So this is a superhuman or extraordinary human, a character who can do everything. This is a huge not for me. I don't like characters who have the ability to do everything, that are kind of almost like a Mary Sue character, that they maybe only have one weakness, or like a person is their weakness. I find that very overdone and really boring, because to me it doesn't provide any sort of stakes. Like a comic book hero that I don't enjoy at all is actually Superman. Probably a controversial opinion, but I just don't like the fact that he's, you know, super strong. He's bullet resistant, he has, you know, x-ray vision, he can fly around, but the only thing really that can stop him is kryptonite. I'm not into that. So I'm gonna give this one a big no. Letter V is going to be Victorian, or literature written from 1837 to 1901. Unfortunately for me, Victorian literature is a not. It is not something that I gravitate towards. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't read it, especially if it were part of a book club or something like that. I would pick it up, but it's not something that I am actively seeking out. So that's going to be a no. I'm sorry, Kat. I know you love Victorian literature. The letter W is going to be for Western, and this is also a not for me. I do not seek out Westerns. I'm not interested in reading them. I can only think of one book within the last few years that I read that it would even count as that, but the only reason that it did was because it was actually like a dystopian novel, not like a traditional Western. So I'm just, yeah, no. No for Western. X is for X-rated, again, meaning like romance, smut, books of that variety. That's a huge no for me. I avoid those. I'm not interested in them. I find the plots very shallow. I find the characters very shallow. It's very one track, like you know exactly what the goal of the story is, and I'm not interested in that at all. I want something that stimulates my mind a lot more. So yeah, No. X, no for X-rated. Y is going to be young adult. Now, before this year, I would have also given this just a huge not, because I have said for a while now that young adult isn't really my favorite. Like, I would actually rather read a middle grade story or an adult story than a young adult story, because I find that a lot of young adult characters, again, it's either focusing on some sort of romance, or they're very angsty, or, you know, it's these teenagers that are going against the government because all of these adults are stupid and some teenagers can take them down, like, just because they want to. I have not thought highly of stories like that since I was a young teen myself. However, I recognize that there are some young adult novels that are still hard-hitting, that are still really good at covering those topics that aren't just shallow in nature. So I don't want to completely write off that age group, because I'm still kind of figuring out what those books are. So I'm actually, because I've read 2 recently that were quite good. So I read Alatsoe by Darcy Littlebadger, and I read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. Both of those were great, and they didn't have any of the YA tropes that I have grown to despise. I'm actually going to give this a hot, because now I'm going to actively be seeking more stories out that are like those. And lastly, letter Z is zeitgeist, which is the spirit or mood of the times. I'm gonna say for this genre, because it's not something that I would seek out, like those types of stories. I don't know if zeitgeist, like, could you count a contemporary, maybe like a literary fiction story as being zeitgeist, because they can take place during the here and now and they cover issues of what is going on in our society right now? Or is zeitgeist something else? I guess that could mean different things for different people. I do enjoy literary fiction. I sometimes enjoy contemporary fiction, but it's not my favorite thing to gravitate towards. So I'm going to go with a not for this one. So I didn't go through and count those. I don't know the exact number of how many hots and nots that I had, so I will put those up on the screen right now. I feel like they were pretty even. Like, I don't think that one is going to be even 5 more over than another. I feel like they were pretty close. So I guess we'll see when the numbers show up here. This is also the part of the video where I get to tag other people. So now I am going to tag my friend Melinda from Melinda at a Web of Stories, and Sabrina from Sabrina Reads and Rambles. I would love to hear your answers to these questions if you choose to do this tag. And also I just want to say thank you again, Kat, for including me on this one, because I always love it when you think of me. I appreciate it so much. And with that, that is the end of the video. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please give it a like and a comment down below. It helps out my channel immensely. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.